Mr. Schellenberger, can you explain how you traced USAID funding that served as the basis for whistleblower report in 2019, which led to the impeachment of President Trump?
Well, you may remember that the so-called whistleblower in the White House was actually a CIA analyst. And in that whistleblower's complaint, which led to the impeachment, one of the central pieces of evidence was created by a USAID funded and controlled organization called the OCCRP. And we have another piece out today about how it participated in the Russiagate hoax as well, creating essentially very important information leading to that. So, I mean, you have in USAID a much larger fund of money and a much broader strategy for information control that included censorship, but also, as I mentioned, taking control of investigative journalism really worldwide. I mean, its ambitions were, amazing. So, yeah, I mean, that's an agency. When we saw that get shut down by DOGE, I thought that was completely appropriate.
What seems surprising to me, of course, is the reaction not only from the European leaders, but also from the mainstream media. Natalie, they don't want this war to end, do they?
No, absolutely not. Although I do think what is different about the negotiations that you're seeing underway right now is this is the first time in 4 years that America has actually been able to negotiate from the standpoint of what puts America and American citizens first, as opposed to being so marred down and bogged down by so many conflicts of interest. I'm not just talking about Burisma, but the ideological capture too, that Ukraine is, the forefront, the vanguard of the global fight for democracy. And if it falls, then the United States is going to perish. So how nice and refreshing to see actual leadership like you can see up there on screen. But I also think too, you have to sort of link this back. It's, of course, inextricably linked to what is going on at USAID, even the Pentagon with what DOGE is doing and auditing all these entities, right? Like we say, the gravy train is running dry when it comes to these aid packages for Ukraine. But when you see the European counterparts calling their emergency meeting, I think the first one in at least a few years, they know that the second step to cutting and ceasing all these grants, these aid packages, well, then comes the audits. And I think that very well may be the most influential bargaining chip that the White House has in terms of holding not just the Ukrainians, but more broadly what's been going on in terms of the scam that is foreign aid laundering. Let's just call it what it is, money laundering. So it'll be certainly interesting to have this all play out, but it's nice to see an administration that can actually put America first.
Well, Natalie, it's incredible that you mentioned that, because today's question of the day, by the way, is, look, we are going to be running an investigation into not only where that money went, but also who has been lining their own pockets with the money for this Ukraine aid and all these other USAID type programs from the United States government. And we need to run that investigation throughout all of Washington, D.C. So our question of the day, and we'll read some answers here and in e-block at the end of the show, 1776@humanevents.com. What should the name of the operation be of this investigation? So, Natalie, what do you think? I'm putting you on the spot. Any ideas for the name of the investigation? Remember, they had Crossfire, Hurricane into Us, the Typhoon, Fury, all these different names. So I'm thinking, there's Operation Fast and the Furious. That's when they were that was when Holder was bringing illegal guns and selling them to the cartels. We need a name for this operation. And so I'm thinking we can get it up to, DOGE and Elon Musk and the rest of them. So I want to kind of crowdsource this and build it from the ground up. So what do you think, Natalie? Any options? Any submissions?
I have two suggestions. One,
all right, let's
you got to go with Retribution. Or two,
Operation Retribution. That's not bad.
We should co-opt color revolutions and make it red, white, and blue revolutions. We got to take it back. Or
red,
orange
white, and blue
revolution. Take your pick. Yeah,
or the orange.
Well,
the original one in Ukraine. Funny enough, the original 2004 color revolution in Ukraine was called the Orange Revolution, but that was well before that name has gotten its new title. No, or Operation Retribution, Operation Reciprocity. That's not bad. We kept saying reciprocity last year, and or how about just Operation Justice? Right? Because that's what this is about. It's about due justice for all of this. And we'll get into it a little bit in the next segment, but it's not just about Ukraine. But Natalie, getting back to these talks, Imperial Washington and professional DC, they don't want these kind of talks happening, do they? They want the gravy train to keep going. They actually believe in this idea of the U.S. as this global empire that is, of course, we're going to punish the Russians, we're going to punish the Chinese Communist Party. In doing so, doesn't that mean that we're actually driving them together? And what it seems as though President Trump is doing, expertly, by the way, I might add, which is something that we've talked about in the War Room for a long time and a long time here in Human Events Daily, is, look, if there's three superpowers in the world, the U.S., Russia, and China, why should we drive them together? Wouldn't it make much more sense to try to peel them off and then use that to instill a pincer movement on the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, I mean, the very fact that they equate us wanting transparency to retribution, I think, is probably mass industrial grade projection, right? It shows you just how guilty they are. This idea that to them democracy means the sort of preferred regimes of the ruling class abroad. And, make no mistake, what is it? 9 out of 10 media outlets in Ukraine were bankrolled by USAID or United States government funding. And I think that sort of shows you they were funding those media organizations not to do actual reporting, but to cover up the crimes, not just of Ukrainian leaders, but of their American counterparts too. And I think, Jack, you're correct. This idea that, by shuttering USAID, American soft power is going to just completely dissipate. Very much through the same paradigm that I think people are asking, well, do we abolish the DOE or do we try to reform it from within? Do we abolish this institution or do we try to reform it from within? And I think the abolition, the destruction of USAID, rightfully so, it sort of raises the question, can we even sort of reform the idea of what it means to be America abroad through the paradigm, through the lens of what the normizers, the globalist architects of the world have constructed, right? The very idea, the sheer idea of USAID, or do we have to sort of start from scratch? And I think that what you're seeing right now underway on the world stage is America actually using its muscle, not from some weird, perverse idea that we have to negotiate through the lens of equity and not flex our might. I think the idea that we can actually flex our economic hegemony. You see that with the tariffs. You see that with President Trump just sort of commanding the entire global stage when it comes to world affairs. But it's a paradigm shift. And it's a paradigm shift that the American people have wanted for a very long time, that they're now trying to gaslight us and call it a hostile takeover of the United States government.